idea and the importance of resting and following the biblical pattern for rest and the biblical need for rest. Just a little background for myself. I've been a full-time pastor for a little over 20 years now. Got my call to ministry when I was on the Tennessee district. I was in Clarksville, Tennessee, and Clarksville First Church of the Nazarene, and became a children's pastor there. And came out of that church as a layman. They brought me from layman into be a pastor, and I absolutely loved that church. Spent time there. I would go in on my day off just to see what was happening. I was passionate about what God was doing, and have always been involved in church work as long as I can remember. And when I got on staff, absolutely loved being a children's pastor. And so I was there at some point 7 days a week and was excited and energized and passionate. And just why would I stay home? I love being at the church. I love doing what God's called me to do. I think it was the first district assembly that I attended as a pastor. There was a speaker that had been brought in. You may have heard of him. It was Dr. Daniel Spate. He's fairly prominent. I've heard him speak at General Assembly and other places. He's a medical doctor whose father was a Nazarene pastor, and he was sharing a book that he had written. It's this book right here, Time Bomb in the Church, Defusing Pastoral Burnout. And in this book, he made the case that rest and a Sabbath and periods of rest are vital if we are going to continue in the calling that God has placed on us. It's specifically toward pastors, but a lot of the principles are just for anybody in general. He goes through the physical need for rest and also just the spiritual need for rest, the biblical mandate for rest. And so as I listened to that, first thing I did was order the book when I got out, and I read it and just became convinced that, I was early in the ministry and had a lot of energy, but if I wanted to make it the long term, that there were some things that I needed, some practices that I needed to do, some rest that I needed to take, and I needed to take the scripture seriously when it mentions this. And I can say to you today that if I had not taken those, put those principles in place, that I don't think I'd be sitting here on the SWID district. May still be in the ministry, but would probably be somewhere else. But I think this is where God wants me to be. So I'm glad that I did put those principles in place. So I want to just take a little time. I want to give a brief summary of some of the things that were in that book. And then I've been taking a day off since that point. I have one day that is set off that is my Sabbath. My church knows that. I only get contacted for emergencies on that day. Twice a year, I go out for a personal retreat. Sometimes that's alone, sometimes that's organized, but twice a year I do that. And then, as Pastor Crump shared, I took my first sabbatical 4 years ago, and I am looking forward to next year starting to plan my next sabbatical because it was an incredible, powerful experience for both me and, as he said, for my church. So anyway, I want to jump into some of the principles that were brought out in that time bomb in the church that were so impactful for me. And he starts off the book, and any medical questions you have, I cannot answer. I'm going to share from his expertise. But if you want to go in any deeper on some of the things that I'm going to share, contact your doctor because I only have the information that I'm sharing here. But I trust his expertise and the information that he shared. And one of the things that he definitely made a point is that there is a clear link between stress and disease and ill health. And that there are both good things and bad things can cause stress. If you're planning for a wedding, there's stress. If you have death in the family, there's stress. There can be good things and bad things that lead to stress. And he provides in his book, and I can make that available, a checklist of things that happened in your life, and they have point values, and they can add up how much stress you have in your life over the past year. And if you hit a certain point, this test is used to determine how at risk you are to getting sick at this point or over the next year. And so I took that test, and every time I've taken it, I have enough stress in my life that I could get sick this next year. So we have to be sure that we're handling that stress and taking steps to counter that stress, just from a physical standpoint. He goes into, and I'm just going to share a few of the things that he shares, that when we have stress, our body starts producing hormones for us to deal with the stressful situations. For short term, we get an adrenaline burst where we get that extra energy that we need to get through this time. But that's for short term. It doesn't last, again, long term. And we notice it when that happens. But for longer extended times of stress, the body produces corticosterone. I think that is how I pronounce it. And that's not something that we even notice, but it's something that our body produces to help us get through stressful times. Now, the negative of that, if we have an extended time of stress, is that too much of that hormone can lead to high blood pressure and gives us an increase in the risk of coronary heart disease. So some of the issues there with stress and our health. Another stress is what he calls stress-induced analgesia. That if we are in this stress long enough, that our body kind of numbs itself to that stress just so we can survive and make it through it. And it decreases our ability to feel pain. I think he gave in his book a testimony of a guy who was just running all the time. And then when he finally slowed down, his body began to feel pain, and he had some very serious health issues that he needed to deal with. But because he never stopped, he never felt it. Now, eventually it was going to catch up with him and he would be forced to stop. And we'll talk more about that a little later. But he talks about this stress-induced analgesia and gives an example of what he calls ministry-induced analgesia. So I just want to read a little bit from his book because I think we can probably all relate to this. He says, the phenomenon of stress-induced analgesia underscores the fact that when you're under stress, you may not feel it. You may not recognize factors that produce stress, especially if they exist as a repeated part of your lifestyle. This holds significant implications for ministry-related stress. Let me give a practical example. You probably set the date for your vacation well in advance to fit between the regular demands of the church calendar. The mad push it takes to get ready to leave makes you wonder if you can really afford to take the vacation. Besides, you don't even feel like going on a vacation. You'd rather be working. But you promise, so you make your lists, delegate like crazy, leave numbers, and promise to keep in touch. After you've been gone a day or two, it hits an overwhelming fatigue. It's an effort to keep up with the rest of the family. Sometimes you don't. You blame it on age or being out of shape or even a virus. Soon, it's time to think about returning. Much to your surprise, you don't experience that hard drive push to get back. In fact, though you won't admit it to anyone, the thought of getting back behind your desk and looking at your calendar and all the work you set aside for your return fills you with a sense of dread, and you begin to entertain thoughts that maybe God is telling you it's time to leave. God may be trying to get a message across, but it's not about a change of assignment. It's about a change in your assignment. The vacation example shows what happens when we adapt so well to the stress that it produces a ministry-induced analgesia. Living with constant unrelating stress overworks the endorphin system. The numbing effect from endorphin prevents you from receiving stressful symptoms. You are unaware of the stress until you leave the situation. Anybody relate at all to that? Maybe. I see a few head nods there. And so as he shares with this, he shares the only cure, it only happens by removing the stress or removing ourselves from the stressful situation, at least for a period of time. He goes on to share so many of the ill health and the disease that can come from stress. And he also emphasizes, do not try to self-diagnose. because symptoms of chronic stress could actually be coming from a disease. So I'll throw that warning in here. But some of the other symptoms from chronic stress are abdominal symptoms, digestive problems, ulcers, hypertension, asthma, hyperthyroidism. And then it also leads to exhaustion, which is another major contributor to disease, ill health, and accidents. It affects our perspective, our problem-solving skills, our interpersonal relationships, our motivation, endurance, and the immune system. And so these were just some of the physical side of the danger of dealing with stress, and the danger of refusing to take any time for rest. I've met a lot of pastors who've told me they don't take a day off, or they don't take a vacation. They've never taken a sabbatical. They don't get away for retreats. And I will often challenge them on the health of that, and try to talk to them about the need for this. So when we, and so I want to now switch gears a little bit and switch to the scriptural side of things, where it seems that God worked a plan for rest for us into his design for us. And that starts on Genesis 2, where it tells us that on the seventh day, God rested from all the work that he had done. We have the fourth commandment in Exodus 20, verse 9, 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh is a Sabbath to your Lord. You shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male slave or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your towns. And this is a theme that's repeated throughout the Old Testament. There's I don't know if you are familiar with the Bible Project guys. They've got some great videos on YouTube, but as part of their app, they've got actual podcasts where they go into these studies in much more depth. And I'm currently listening to they've got a 14 podcast series on the Sabbath and on rest. I'm about 4 in, and it's really good stuff as they dig deep into the scripture and God's plan for this. So I'm four podcasts in, so I'm hesitant to recommend the whole thing, but so far the first 4 have been pretty good. So if you want to go into a deep dive, I recommend that. He goes on, we share in Leviticus 25, verses 1 through 7, where it says, the Lord spoke to Moses on Mount Sinai, saying, speak to the people of Israel and say to them, when you enter the land that I am giving you, the land shall observe a Sabbath for the Lord. 6 years you shall sow your field, and 6 years you shall prune your vineyard and gather in their yield. But in the 7th year, there shall be a Sabbath of complete rest for the Lord. You shall not sow your field or prune your vineyard. You shall not reap the aftergrowth of your harvest or gather the grapes of your unpruned vine. It shall be a year of complete rest for the Lord. Now, throughout the Old Testament, we see this cycle, this rhythm, this pattern. And Dr. Spate made the case that this pattern was built into us at creation, and it involves a fundamental principle of obedience that influences our lifestyle and our priorities. Now, we see that passage about the Sabbath year and how the land was supposed to have a Sabbath, but we don't see any evidence in the Bible that the people ever obeyed this command and actually gave the land a Sabbath year. And the purpose of that, again, was to let the land rest so that in the long run, it would bear fruit more bountifully. And then it was a matter of faith. We see in Leviticus 25:20, it said, should you ask, what shall we eat in the 7th year, if we may not sow or gather in our crop? And I will order my blessing for you in the 6th year, so that it will yield a crop for 3 years. So this is telling us that the question is, would God's people trust that God would provide for them, even if they didn't plant or harvest for a full year? And we see that disobedience to this command does bring consequences. As I said, there's not any evidence that they obeyed the 7-year Sabbath, but we do see a lot of evidence where they spent a significant amount of time where they did not observe the Sabbath year. Jeremiah prophesies that the Israelite people will experience 70 years of exile into Babylon. Second Chronicles 36:21 says, the Israelites were taken into exile to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah until the land has made up for its Sabbaths. All the days that it shall lay desolate, it kept Sabbath to fulfill 70 years. So it took exile for the promised land to get its Sabbath. And so in this, as we look at this principle, we see two reasons for this seventh rest cycles. The first is physical, that God designed this cycle to give the human body the rest it needs. And second is a faith issue, because God is reminding us that we're depending on him. It's not in our strength, that we're depending on him. And he is going to continue to minister even if we're not present. It's his church. There's no exception clause that I've found that allows overwork without consequences just because we serve God and are called to ministry. Instead, because we serve God, we should follow his design that includes rest as a predictable part of our week and our life. The seventh cycle is still relevant to us. And just as the land got back its Sabbaths, if we don't give our body its Sabbaths, our body systems of checks and balances will take them back. So we can make a decision. We can either take our Sabbaths, lying on the couch, reading a book, playing golf, working out in the garden, doing those kind of things, whatever allows you to rest and relax and recharge, or we can take them when our body breaks down and we're in the hospital. That's really the choices that we're given here. As I've shared this with other people, not just my own experience, there's a retired pastor who I know who regrets now he had to retire early because he did not take seriously the need for rest, and it cut his ministry short. And I can tell that he still feels that impact and still could have done more. So it took an exile to get Canaan's soil its 70 years of rest. And my question for you guys today is, what will it take for you to get the rest that you need? I've heard a lot of excuses from pastors, a lot of reasons, but none of them seem to counter none of them are scripture based. It's more, hey, I'm passionate about this. I love what I'm doing. God's called me to do this. God will strengthen me and let me and give me the strength I need to fulfill this mission. And while I believe that is possible, I believe that God can supernaturally give us strength in any situation. He's God, he can do whatever, but I don't believe that's his plan for us. And the most convincing thing for me is just as we look at Jesus himself. If anybody could count on supernatural strength and supernatural power, and anybody had a mission that needed to be completed in a short amount of time and had excuses for ignoring these commands for rest, it would be Jesus. But we see in Luke chapter 5, 15 and 16, we see, but now more than ever, the word about Jesus spread abroad. Many crowds would gather to hear him and to be cured of their diseases, but he would withdraw to deserted places to pray. So if Jesus, in the midst of his incredibly successful ministry, as he is drawing crowds that most of us dream of, and doing ministry that is beyond anything that I have ever been a part of, had plenty of excuses to ignore the call for rest and solitude, to continue on with the importance of ministry. If he took time to withdraw to deserted places to pray and to connect with God and to rest, then I'm convinced anyway that we are supposed to do that as well. So I've been talking nonstop here. So I just want to, I've got a few more things, some suggestions on how to do this. Dr. Spate has a prescription here for how to counter all this stress. But I just want to open up for any comments, questions that you guys have at this point. Quiet bunch.
Yeah, I had a question.
Sure.
I've had some mentors that have, modeled kind of Sabbath living and even the kind of not just the Sabbath, but the sabbatical. Mm-hmm. I wondered if with your sabbatical coming up, if you would have any thoughts, ideas on how you structure. I know there's not maybe not a particular one way, but I'm guessing there are some good ways and faithful ways and some, hey, let's just go to Disney World for 7 weeks or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I just wondered if you had some thoughts for that about that, or if that strays too much from what you're wanting to talk about right now.
I'm here to talk about whatever helps you guys out. If I can share some of the things, and I've given some thought to the next sabbatical, but I can share you what I did for my last sabbatical, my first and my only sabbatical so far, and it was not just an extended vacation. I did not go to Disney World, though I think you probably could work that in if for some family time. I don't know. I'll leave that up to you. But for my sabbatical, I got a lot of books and resources. I think maybe Pastor Crump may have recommended some, and then I applied for a grant from the Lilly Foundation to pay for my sabbatical. And I will say that it's the best grant that I didn't get, because it forced me to plan my sabbatical a year in advance, and it has all this structure to bring my board in and my church to be involved in that planning. They have additional resources for how to plan and different ideas and different things to personalize your sabbatical and get the most out of it. And I went through that whole process and did not get the grant, but it gave me a foundation, and I was able to do most of the things that I had originally wanted to do. I had to, I wasn't, I had to get cheaper flights and have longer layovers, and my hotels and Airbnbs were a little cheaper than originally planned for. And I couldn't take my family with me everywhere to all the places I had wanted to be a part of it. But I was still able to do most of the things. And for me, I started off, I flew to Paris. Actually, the first day I spent on the lake fishing with my dad. And then the next day I flew to Paris, and I spent a week in a community south of Paris called the Taizé community. I can't go into all the details of what that is, but it is a beautiful community that is designed to draw people from different Christian faiths together, Catholics, Protestants, Orthodox, attracts I think 150,000, 200,000 people 35 and under there that come to spend the extended amount of time there every year. And it was just an incredibly powerful, peaceful experience. I could probably spend the next 30 minutes just talking about that community. And if you want to have a cup of coffee and talk about it, I will. But I'm not going to take all our time here to talk about it. But it was restful. I met people from all over the world who love Jesus, and just had a phenomenal time of worship and just reconnecting with God. My second week, I spent a week in Rome, and just went to churches and the Vatican and museums, and went to Assisi for a day to see where St. Francis had been from, and just had an incredible time there. Came back to the United States. I think week 3, I just stayed at home. I took a week and went back to Cape May, New Jersey, where I served as children's pastor there for 4 years. I took my wife and my son with me, and we went and visited there and reconnected with our church there. My wife and I went to San Diego to visit my daughter. There's a cabin that is in Elizabeth, Indiana, and I'll get you some information on that if you're interested. But they allow pastors to come and stay for free. I call it a cabin. My wife tells me.
She did not know that she told me. How can you stand?
Oh, my wife tells me I have to stop calling it a cabin because it is a 3-story log cabin that sleeps up to 25 people. And that's not what people think when I say cabin. But they allow pastors to come and stay for free. And so I went and spent a week out there. It's very secluded. I try to go there at least once a year, but I spent a full week there. trying to think what else I did. I had some interspersed. I was home and then I'd be gone. I'd be home. I'd be gone. But I finished up my sabbatical at the Abbey of Gethsemane. It's a monastery that's south of Louisville. The Thomas Merton was there, if you're familiar with the author Thomas Merton, and they offer silent retreats. And I went a Monday through Friday silent retreat and spent 5 days there worshiping with the monks. And it was an incredible way to finish off the sabbatical. They have some great hiking trails there. They pray 7 times a day, multiple worship services. And and again, I can give a lot more details on the specifics of that, but it was a wonderful experience. And so when I went into my sabbatical, I was at a time where I was tired. I had no vision for Grace Church for the first time in my ministry there, and did not know where we were supposed to go next or what we were supposed to be doing. But I came back energized, passionate, and with new vision for Grace Church. And I say I wouldn't be here. Probably wouldn't be here. I don't want to take God completely out of the equation in my time of prayer and being obedient to him. But it wasn't long after I got back from my sabbatical that the church I grew up in needed a pastor and contacted me about coming. And I would have very seriously considered going to that church if I hadn't been on sabbatical, and probably could have found excuses for going there. But God had other plans, and it's 4 years later and still passionate and excited about what's going on at Grace Church. So hopefully that answers some of your questions.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't want to monopolize time, but
no, it's fine.
Could you talk a little bit about, I've just heard some pastors when they go on sabbatical working with the board, some of that is like rest and renewal, reconnecting, with God, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
You mentioned about just kind of receiving and grace, but also that element of like learning. A friend of mine, Jaron Rowell, when he went away, he did some, hey, I want to go and visit with some different churches and learn some particular things. And he kind of proposed this to his church board of like, here's kind of what I hope to learn. And I just wondered, like, that part of it, like, I'm just kind of thinking, how much of sabbatical needs to be a homework assignment, but how much of it is just kind of, just to give the Disney example or whatever. And what do you think about that whole element of like specific learning goals and how that impacts your church going forward, and how much, I don't know if the right word is work, but you know what I'm asking?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that I know that there are some sabbaticals, and some people take a sabbatical to focus on their education. And I think that is a valid reason and can be used for that. That wasn't my primary goal for sabbatical. And I think that we all have to take that in consideration, what we need. I love education. I loved taking my classes through NBC to be ordained. I would love to go back and take some more classes. But that is not restful for me. And so that I love it, but that drains me. So I did not do that. I took, I had a stack of books and took them with me and was reading all the time to learn. But it was not a formal, I have to do assignments and that kind of thing. So I think there's room for that. And depending on where you are, it could be valid, but that was not the stated purpose or one of the goals when I took my sabbatical. And speaking of boards, Pastor Crump came and presented it to our board, just what the district's policy was. And my board was 100% behind it. After the board had decided that they were going to do this, we just called an all church meeting after a service one morning and said, here, we're going to talk about this and we're going to approach this. And I want to know what your concerns are. And here's what we're doing. And here's why we're doing it. And I got overwhelming support from my congregation. There were a few people who were concerned that the church would suffer with me being gone for 11 weeks, that we had some wonderful things that were happening in the church, and they felt like people would leave or that those things would come to a halt. But we were very intentional about what was going to happen when I was gone. And again, we had this planned out a year before I took the sabbatical. We had all of this put into place. And when I left, the church did not skip a beat. It was a very, very powerful reminder that that church is God's, it's not mine, and he loves it more than I do. And if I'm in obedience to him, I'm trusting that he's going to take care of it. And he did. And we found out the same experience this past summer. My associate pastor took an 8-week sabbatical, and he provides worship and does a million things that in addition to his other jobs. But and again, we were very intentional about making sure everything he does is covered, and the church never noticed some of the little hiccups that happened while he was gone. And we had incredible times of worship, and heard new songs and heard different voices, and it was actually a very good thing for our church. But then we're all that more appreciative when he came back. So that was a positive experience for us as well.
Hey, Brad, I have a question. You mentioned your twice-a-year personal retreat.
Yes.
Could you tell us what you've done in those, and go in a little bit more depth with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as I mentioned, there's this cabin that's out in everywhere I've gone, I have taken these retreats. I remember the first one I went on, it was when I was in Tennessee. I went out to this cabin way out in the boonies. And as I pulled up in the evening and was preparing for just several days. I didn't know what to expect. I was just going out to a cabin with a Bible and a stack of books, and had all the concerns that everybody has. What am I going to do for the next 3 days without television and phones and computers and all that kind of stuff? How boring is this going to be? But when I pulled up to the cabin, I just stopped, and I just felt first this exhaustion hit me, and then I just felt the power of the Holy Spirit, and I just sat in the car and just cried for a few minutes as God was ensuring me that this was going to be a wonderful time, and we were going to have an incredible time there. And it was phenomenal. I have kind of a formula here that I use for how we do this. Once a year, I try to go to that cabin that I mentioned. It's called the Potter's House, and I can give you all the contact information and how to make the reservations and all that. Wonderful people. They're also available if you want to do a workshop or a church conference or whatever. And they do charge. If it's a group that comes out, they provide all the food, and all of their money that they bring in through this ministry goes toward mission trips that they take. So it's a beautiful thing. But when I go there, it's the goal is just to separate from stress. It's just rest. I take a stack of books and my Bible. Also, I like to cook. So I take new recipes that I experiment, and if they work, then I bring them home to the family. If not, then I toss them. But they've got an beautiful trail to hike. So I go on a hike every day. I eat when I want to eat. I read when I feel like reading. I pray throughout the day. I take a hike and spend 3 to 4 days just doing that. And so there's no internet there. It's getting to the point where cell phone reception is actually happening, and I can text now on a regular basis. But when I first started going out there, they didn't have internet reception or data or anything. And it's just a complete separation from the norm, and it's just focused on rest. Since I went to the Abbey of Gethsemane and discovered the Catholics really do retreats well, and I have had some wonderful experience in the Taizé community at the Abbey of Gethsemane. And more recently, I went to the White House Retreat Center in St. Louis. It's a Jesuit retreat center. So I'm working in one of those organized retreats once a year. I want to go to St. Meinrad. I want to go there. I know they have retreats. I haven't experienced that yet. But theirs is more organized, and they have times where there are things scheduled. Now you can go to them if you want, or skip them if you want. Nobody's checking on you. But it's a little different feel, but it's still very beneficial. And had some wonderful times of connecting with God and experience different types of worship and that sort of thing. So those are the two that I try to go to. I try to go to the cabin once, and then I've been going to a more organized Catholic retreat on the second one. And I will say that sometimes I don't schedule them soon enough. And my wife can now tell when I need a retreat. And it gets to the point where I am a little irritable and grumpy and may not be the nicest person to be with. And so she will encourage me to take these retreats, because when I come back, I'm a very different person. And so she has seen the benefit of these retreats, not just for our marriage, as well as for me personally. So. Okay. All right. Any other questions? I've got just a couple more things here.
Hey, Brett, I've got one.
Okay.
Hey, are you going to lead your retreat on retreating anytime soon? The last one it was so close to the pastoring spouses.
Yeah,
I wanted to go. I couldn't justify both.
Yeah. I would definitely be willing, but having to cancel that last one had a financial cost to it. And so before I would commit, I would have to know that I have people interested. It did have a cost. I can't remember how much it was. I'm not making anything off of it. I'm trying to work in enough that it wouldn't cost me anything personally to go, that my fee would be cared for. Yeah, I would definitely be interested in doing that. We did a retreat on retreating. I had pastors tell me, it's like, hey, I would love to do that, but I don't know what to do. Could you kind of hold our hand and show us how to retreat? And so we had a retreat on retreating, had 6 or 7 people that came and were part of it. It was incredibly wonderful, got great responses from all of them. But then when I scheduled the next one, I did not get enough people to make it worthwhile to have it. So yes, the answer, I would love to, but somehow I got to figure out that there's enough people that can do it and are interested in doing it. And we held it at that cabin that I've been talking about, the Potter's House. And there is a cost to it because they do provide all the meals and so.
I have a question. Oh, sorry, I have no stand.
Yeah, that's all right.
So I'm just wondering how this all works for a bivocational pastor or tri-vocational, as that's me. I'm currently on vacation from my first job, but I obviously have to continue working my second part-time job and then come work for the church as well. So obviously, like with financial things and the economy the way it is, there's just not the ability to really take a vacation. So how does that work for bivocational?
Well, I do have a part-time job, but it's we're at a point now where it funds my vacation, so I can take off from it. So I don't know 100% on that. I don't know if you get vacation time from your part-time job. I work for a grocery store that actually pays me, even though I work 8 hours a week, they still give me vacation time and vacation pay. So I don't have a definitive answer on that on the financial side of things. I mean, would love to sit down and take a look at your situation specifically with you if you'd like to do that, and see if there are some suggestions that I can take. But I do think that this is, for me, this retreating and getting away has become vital. As I said, my wife can tell when I need a retreat, and I can't imagine going extended past that, just the exhaustion and the burnout. I can't imagine trying to minister in the midst of that. So this has become a high priority for me. This is what I use. Some of my vacation time for, is the retreat. So that's, if you get any time off, I would recommend taking a portion of it to retreat.
Can she have her senior pastor finance that?
Do what? And that might be something to approach the church about. The part of the Dr. Spate has a prescription. I'm going to share it here before we go. Well, maybe even share it now, but he's got a prescription, and some of the things that their district has done and suggests that the churches do to help pastors in this process. So I don't know if that's an option. It would be at Grace. If I could not afford this, then I am comfortable enough that I could go to my church, and I think they would be receptive to this, to helping it out.
Yeah, I'm not sure because I don't get paid for the church. So
Okay.
So let me jump in here real quick. So one of the things I would say to pastors, the retreat, there is a learning retreat that we did, but then there's another retreat that we go Friday through Sunday. That's very intentional. It was actually Dr. Spate who actually spoke at one like that and talked about how many pastors are unwilling to go on a retreat that would cover a Sunday because they can't imagine not being in the pulpit. And when he said that, it really bothered me because he was speaking to me. So I want to let you know that's an intentional thing. And so Amanda, I would encourage you to talk to your lead pastor, since he's on here, Phil, and and again, he can't always make those decisions. It's a board decision. But I am more than willing to talk to any of your boards about this matter. Brett probably would be willing to come or join a board meeting through Zoom. Probably be the easiest way. And Brett, I'd love for you, if you're willing, to share some contact information, however you would feel most comfortable with this group and those that may be watching it later. And if you'd put that in the chat section for us, that way then they can grab it if they so desire. Okay, I'm done. But go ahead back, Brett.
Sure. Well, yeah, I'm typing that information in. So if anybody has any more questions while I do this. Let me see. So my email and cell phone are in there. And you guys, I love talking about this. So if I'd rather do it over a cup of coffee, but be happy to do it over Zoom or on the phone, however that works out. But this is something that I am passionate about, and we'll talk about it any opportunity I can. I'm going to go ahead and go over the prescription that Dr. Spate shared. these are the suggestions that that he made specifically for dealing with this. And then if you guys have any more questions, be happy to go over those. First, first he asks a question: do you take a full 24 hours off in each weekly cycle? He says, commit yourself to God's biblical plan for rest and renewal. Protect private time with the Lord each day. Rest 1 full day a week, and then plan periodic times of renewal. Mark these times on your calendar. And his district, I mean, through his help, encourages churches to grant a full 24 hours off each week, a week off every 7 months, in addition to vacation weeks, and then a sabbatical of 7 weeks after 7 years of service, in addition to vacation weeks. As we get away, he shares, get away from your phone on your day off, screen your calls and answer only emergencies. Then develop an accountability relationship with one or more wise counselors. Talk to your spouse before adding any new responsibility. Never give an immediate answer about a new responsibility. And then he gives the following. He says, too many Christians believe that it is more spiritual to err on the side of saying yes. However, there is no evidence in Scripture that God is more pleased with a wrong yes than a wrong no. And then finally, remind yourself that God doesn't need you to save the world. He needs you to obey. And so that is a hard one for most of us to grasp, that the church can get along well in God's hands and when we're not there. So those are his suggestions, and I found them to be valuable.
Any closing questions here?
Now, one final thing, unless there are more questions, I do have a list of the retreat centers that I have been to, and have the contact information for the Potter's House, the cabin that I go to. And again, it's a very comfortable, wonderful stay, and it is absolutely free. I used to try to leave some money for them, and they stopped cashing my checks. So they are very, very, they mean it when they say it's a ministry to pastors. And so again, I highly recommend going to that place. It is one of my favorite places on the planet. It is holy ground to me, and I would love to see more pastors take advantage of this opportunity. But I will, I guess, send this list to Pastor Crump or Nathan and see if they want to pass it out, or you can contact me directly, and I'll be happy to email it to you, however you want to handle it.
Hey, Brett, if you'd send it to Nathan, we'll stick it on the website, and
Okay.
this will be a place that I think there are other places that I think that are out there for pastors. And so we need to develop maybe a resource for that.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I love to find new places. This is still an ongoing journey for me. As I find new places, I love to go experience retreats with different people.
Okay. Okay, Pastor Brett, I want to say a huge thank you. One of the things I love about what you've shared is that you have practiced it. I've seen the positive results, both in you and your congregation. And I still think we need to have you present probably at the next Equip. So Nathan, make sure I don't mess up and leave him out. And part of it is that I think, Brett, at Equip, you would have the ability to talk to lay people. Sometimes I think there are pastors out there, and I think they're probably even on this session, who could really benefit from it, but are concerned about how church leaders are going to respond. And I have had on one of our churches, I had a church really get pretty ugly at a pastor over sabbatical, and it did not happen, or it did not go very long. And this, you'll probably still end up in an Equip, but I want your focus to be not only pastoral, but be from a lay perspective, the benefits, and have maybe a lay person or two from your church join. Okay.
Wonderful. Yeah, that'd be great. And as Pastor, if you think it'd be beneficial for me to speak to your board, I would be happy to do it, or have further conversations with you guys. I like I said, I love this stuff. So, yeah.
And as a pastor, you need to realize that the manual speaks about sabbaticals. It's typically, once you've been at a church 7 years. So typically when we're doing the second review, that would be, you'd just be finishing up your 6th year. That would be a time in which I would be talking automatically about sabbatical. But if you were doing the Eli Lilly, and I put all that information in the chat section as well, you need to be thinking a couple years ahead. In fact, they've got a thing this Friday, 1 o'clock to 2:30 for people that are going to be pushing a year and a half, 2 years from now. Okay. And you're not guaranteed to getting that. It's pretty competitive, but we have had a few pastors on our district who have received it, so that you're aware. Okay.
Yeah. And on that note, like I said, I had mine planned out a year in advance, and that was atypical for me. I'm a last minute kind of planner. And I've met a couple of pastors who have just got to the end of their rope and tried to throw a sabbatical together with just a few months or a few weeks time, and have not had the same impact. Their sabbatical did not have the same impact on them that mine had on me. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay. All right. Hey, everybody, thanks for joining us, and we'll get this recording out there as well. And everyone have a great day. Love and appreciate you. Keep up the good work of the Lord. I pray that your churches took care of you in some tangible way for pastor appreciation, but I know that that doesn't always happen. And we tried a number of avenues to communicate. So hopefully someone thought of you during this time. Everybody take care and have a good day. Thank you.
Hey, Brother Tim.
Yes.
Did you say that tonight's meeting with Gary Ritter, if our treasurer went to Equip, that this is the same thing that they heard at Equip?
I think it's probably 90 to 95% the same thing.
All right, because I was encouraged her to do that, so I will tell her she doesn't have to then. All right, thanks.
All right, thank you.